Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. After months of deadlock and rising tariffs, the India-U.S. trade ties have witnessed a significant turnaround. So what seemed stuck in a cycle of sharp rhetoric, pressure and posturing through much of last year has now produced a breakthrough. A phone call between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and U.S. President Donald Trump has delivered what both sides are now calling a landmark trade agreement. The agreement slashes U.S. tariffs on Indian goods to 18% from 50%, signaling a reset in economic ties between India and the United States after a year marked more by friction than by friendship. Prime Minister Modi says the deal opens the door to immense opportunities, emphasizing that when two of the world's largest democracies work together, the gains are global. External Affairs Minister Dr. Jaishankar echoed that sentiment. He called it a boost for jobs, growth and innovation on both sides. While details of the agreement are awaited, both sides in fact are still on the final stages of detailing the agreement, as was announced by Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. We'll talk about how it benefits both the economies. We'll try and get views from those who understand how this happened and what could this mean for businesses, workers, most importantly, the global trade dynamics. For this, I'm pleased to welcome on this edition of Perspective three eminent guests. Let me begin by introducing them to you. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat. Mr. Sujit Kumar, Member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha. He represents the BJP in the upper house. Mr. Dilip Chenoy, former Secretary General, FICCI. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us for this very interesting conversation. Details of the agreement are still awaited, but at least the announcement comes after months of friction, pressure, tariffs, suddenly giving way to a breakthrough. And I think that's remarkable in more ways than one. Ambassador, to you first. What was your first reaction when the India-U.S. trade pact was announced?
Well, Tina, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. I think when I heard this news, I felt it was a major diplomatic and economic breakthrough. President Trump announced that India and the US would reach a historic trade deal and that the US would reduce tariffs on Indian goods down to 18%. You know, these tariffs had risen to 50%, of which 25% were reciprocal tariffs and 25% were punitive tariffs. Now, in regard to the punitive tariffs, he said that India had agreed to stop buying oil from Russia, which meant that these punitive tariffs would go. Now, significantly, at 18%, India now faces some of the lowest tariff rates among major Asian economies. For instance, China faces 54% tariffs, Vietnam 46%, Pakistan 30%. So this fact itself should be very helpful for Indian exporters, and I think that our exports to the United States will be going up very rapidly by leaps and bounds. Certainly, the Indian markets have surged. The dollar has come down against the rupee. So all this is a sign of the fact that the announcement by Trump is having a very positive effect on the Indian economic scene. And of course, Prime Minister Modi has welcomed President Trump's remarks. Certainly, personal chemistry between these two leaders has helped a lot. Because all along, despite the tensions, Trump had referred to Prime Minister Modi as his good friend, and there is a certain degree of high regard between them. This fact has certainly helped in bringing about the thaw in the very strained India-US trade relations. So I think that on balance, the pitch has been cleared, the atmospherics are better, and now the trade deal can be finalized. Of course, India has been making it very clear that it will not sacrifice the rights of some very important sectors like the farming and dairy sector. These will be protected. But nonetheless, the possibility of a trade deal being reached and signed very quickly are very, very bright.
That's right. We'll talk about the opportunities, but most importantly also some of the key factors that could have led to a breakthrough, not taking away from the fact that diplomats have negotiated extremely well in favor of India. So we haven't had to make compromises, as was assured by the Commerce and Industry Minister. But since you spoke of the Prime Minister, Mr. Kumar, let me ask you this question. Much of last year, we witnessed pressures, rhetoric resulting in tariffs, and more of friction than friendship in the US-India ties, despite us being strategic partners. But what stood out was that our leadership remained silent and patient. Patience, it seems, has done the heavy lifting. What do you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think you have hit the nail on the head. We did not blink at all. We negotiated from a point of strength. We exercised strategic patience, and that has paid off. And this historic US-India trade deal has come after a landmark budget. Today, the Honorable Prime Minister was addressing the members of parliaments of NDA in the morning, and he said that this is the first budget of the second quarter of 21st century. So this is not just an annual financial document. It's in fact a vision for the next 25 years. And this trade deal, coming after the mother of all deals, as the EU-India deal is being called, is laying the roadmap for the Vikasit Bharat for the next 25 years. And let me put it on record, Tinaji, that the Honorable Commerce Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, wanted to make a statement on the floor of the House instead of addressing the media. But the opposition parties didn't let him do that. Very, very shameful that a historic deal of this sort, has to be done through a press briefing rather than on the floor of the House. But because of the attitude of the opposition, the minister was compelled to do so. And he has very categorically said that, we will never compromise with the interest of our farmers or the interest of our dairy sector, and this will be a catalyst for Make in India. This will be a catalyst for Swadeshi. This will be a catalyst for Atmanirbhar Bharat. All of which are going to help us to become the Vikasit Bharat. So our strategic patience has paid off. This is indeed a victory for India's trade diplomacy, victory for decisive leadership that Prime Minister Modi is today known across the globe. Just imagine how other countries got bullied by the US in a way, but we did not. We did not blink. We never exposed ourselves to the bullying of the US, and today we have billion Indian citizens.
That's right. So that patience and time, I think the leadership gave it enough time, perhaps, and that's the result because of which we are seeing that India has managed to bring down the tariffs compared relatively to other countries, but also the tone with which in India and its firm position was being looked at, being described at global forums without having to make any compromises, without any flattery of sorts, and that's something that stands out. Mr. Chinoy, while we await the details and the fine print of this agreement, it comes in at a very important time, just 2 days after the budget, but less than 2 weeks after the India-EU FTA deal. So two important deals in less than 2 weeks. How big is this moment for the Indian industry?
So I think, Tina, again, thank you for having me on the show. It's a big moment for India. I think under Prime Minister's leadership, the negotiating team under Minister Goyal and everyone who contributed to these deals need to be congratulated. I think they have really positioned India very differently in the eyes of not only our trading partners, but in the eyes of the world. So on the broader economic front, what's going to happen is you've already seen that our exports are expected to surge. We lost about $600 million worth of exports, compared to last year when we were looking at this. But I think the exports are going to surge. Second thing, there's going to be a huge upside to the GDP. Goldman Sachs has already predicted a 0.2 to 0.3 percentage point increase in India's GDP. And third, as Ambassador Dayal mentioned, the exchange rate is expected to strengthen. We've actually strengthened today. And that means that it reduces trade uncertainty, which typically attracts FII portfolio investments, and that whole virtuous cycle will happen. Now, let me get very quickly to the tariffs and what its impact on industry is going to be. I think first, if you look at it, earlier when before the punitive duty was mentioned, the duty which Trump, on his historic day when he showed that big chart, the duty there was 20%. Today we are actually at 18%. So by this patience, as Mr. Sujit Kumar and Mr. Ambassador Diyal mentioned, we have actually moved from 20 to 18. What it means that we are even lesser than some of our neighbors, even by only developed countries, which are the UK and EU, at 10 and 15, which are lower than us. So we have a comparative advantage, and especially if you look at China, they are facing about 34 to 30%, 37%, and Brazil, which looks at 50%. So it's a comparative advantage for it. We have a slight edge over Bangladesh, Vietnam, and other countries like that. And what is very interesting in this whole thing is that the sectors that will benefit, are going to be benefited immediately, while the details and all go on. But the understanding is that the sectors will be benefited immediately because US has eliminated those tariffs. See, US has a base MFN duty rate which is 10%. They have a reciprocal tariff rate which is this 18% which comes in, and they have a punitive Russian oil penalty of 25%. So with the punitive penalty going away and the reciprocal tariff layer going down to 18, this is an immediate benefit. You don't have to wait for details, right? Because what happens is the sectors that are going to textiles and apparel, I think it's really going to benefit. So if I just take 50 to 18, right? Gems and jewelry, same thing. Seafood and agriculture, right? You're seeing that actually happen. And leather footwear, again 50 to. There are some exceptions in the deal will be there, not because of the deal, but because of the US Section 232, I think, which which are the safety regulations, where steel and aluminium may still face something, and auto components would not majorly change. So these are things that we can actually look forward to without even getting the details. The details, as both Mr. Sujit Kumar mentioned about protecting certain sectors and the minister mentioned about protecting certain sectors, are what we have to look at is what are the concessions that we're giving to the US side. But as far as Indian exports go, this is like overnight. This is not, we don't have to actually...
But what we've already seen in the previous deals is that India has ensured that sensitive domestic sectors, these are areas on which we don't compromise. I'll come back to you, understand more about how the deal enhances our global competitiveness, how it also strengthens our position in the global supply chain. But coming back to some of the factors, Ambassador, based on your experience, of course, not taking away once again from the fact that our diplomats and the negotiators have done a remarkably well job with somebody as firm as Mr. Donald Trump, who tried to apply so much pressure and rhetoric. He indulged in rhetoric over the last few months or so. But the fact that there are also certain external factors that could have played a role in that climb down that we are seeing from the American side. So is it geopolitical alignment? Is it the India in the backdrop of the India-EU trade deal that has happened? Or could there be domestic compulsions? What is your reading? What could have been these external factors that could have also played a role in this breakthrough?
The most important factor has been that our Prime Minister had stood tall. He refused to bend despite the huge amount of pressure which was brought on him by President Trump. Trump did everything. He kept on increasing tariffs. He threatened to put 500% tariffs through that bill which his close associate Lindsey Graham has tabled in Senate. Trump wanted Prime Minister Modi to do his ego massage. But Prime Minister Modi is a leader of very high global stature. He did not bend under pressure. You remember that the US Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, had said openly in a press conference, public press conference, that Trump wanted Prime Minister Modi to make a telephone call to him, and only after that he would have approved the trade deal. But that was ego massage. Prime Minister Modi talks on matters of substance. He doesn't bend under pressure. He doesn't indulge in ego massage. He is a global leader of a very high stature. So, the firmness which our Prime Minister showed in dealing with the American side is what was the most important factor that made Trump himself bent. He made the telephone call, while all along he had been insisting that there should be a telephone call made by Prime Minister Modi. Then, of course, within the United States, there was a lot of pressure which was building up because there was increasing unhappiness in the United States about rising costs and about the difficulties which were being faced by common people. Then, certainly, the Americans did not fail to notice that India was pursuing a policy of multi-alignment. India was reaching deals with a whole host of countries. And the most important one, of course, was the deal with the European Union. So this announcement by President Trump significantly comes less than a week after the Indo-EU deal. There is also a very great deal of importance being attached to the fact that Trump is himself under pressure because of his policies. He's messed up relations with his allies. He's having a very tough time dealing with China. And then, of course, there are increasing tensions with Iran, for instance. So because of all these reasons, Trump perhaps found himself under increasing pressure. And he thought that a very good way out was to reach out to India for the deal. We are very happy. We wanted the escalation of tensions to stop. We wanted de-escalation. And then, of course, there is this very significant fact that we had been assuring the Americans that, for instance, we want to increase purchases of oil from them. So when Trump says India has agreed, there is nothing new in that. However, there are a few question marks. For instance, Trump has said that India will slowly reduce its tariffs on the U.S. products to zero. So why is Trump then not increasing tariffs on Indian products to zero if he wants us to do that? And he said India will be doing that. Then again, he has said that India has committed to purchase $500 billion of U.S. energy, technology, agricultural products, coal, etc. But is this in 1 year's time? I think not. There is to be some clarification. I think India will perhaps increase its purchases from the United States.
Certainly. And on a lot of those claims that have been made by the American president, we are still to hear any verifications or mentions from the Indian side. But since you spoke about the EU deal and the significance of this deal, multiple factors that could have led to the breakthrough, India's leadership's firm stand, keeping national interest above anything else. Mr. Kumar, if the India-EU deal was the mother of all deals, this was without any doubt one of the most difficult deals for our negotiators given President Trump's policies. But after this agreement that has been announced, do you think it enhances India's credibility in negotiating with other trade partners, but also our position in the global economic landscape?
Absolutely. See, today India's standing, India's goodwill is at an all-time high. Prime Minister Modi is hailed as one of the greatest statesmen in the world today. And as Ambassador Dell pointed out, PM stood tall despite all the personal remarks being made by the different elements in the U.S. administration, particularly by the U.S. Commerce Secretary Lieutenant, and the restrained behavior of India is nothing short of that of a mature leadership. And when you have a philosophy of nation first, as is the governing philosophy of my party and this government, then you have the interest of the nation and the interest of 140 crore citizens as the primary the backup that you have. And this is where the strength Prime Minister Modi and his as I said before, that we never blinked in the entire negotiation, and despite the tantrums of President Trump, despite the theatrics, despite all the personal attacks and remarks against India and the Indian government, we negotiated from a point of strength, and at no point did we sacrifice the interest of our country and our citizens. So this has shown the world that India has the capability to stand up for its interest, and India is not a country that can be bullied. Many let me tell you that over the last several months we have seen several countries succumbing to the US pressure and succumbing to the in a way bullying of the White House, but not us. So this is because today this is because our diplomacy. This is because of our diplomacy, our trade diplomacy, our geopolitical standing, and because of the fact that the world is noticing that we are the fastest growing major economy. We are a country with a youthful population. We are on the path to become a digital powerhouse. We are on the path to become a Viksit Bharat, and we are a country with major military, economic, and technological might.
That's
So
right.
these are all factors, and decisive leadership at the end of the day, Tinaji, everything boils down to decisive leadership.
Clearly, it's the decisive leadership, and most importantly, that phone call that has made all the difference. Coming back to some of the benefits, Mr. Chinoy, the government says this pact will spur innovation. Does that mean that we will see greater and stronger collaboration with the US in areas like technology, research, advanced manufacturing, which will also be one of the expectations coming out of this agreement?
Yes, Tina, I think there are three or four. Let me just quickly, in the interest of time, quickly give three things and then expand on the point that you have made. I think the first thing is the impact on competitive, advantage in India, and India emerging as a preferred hub status because of our deals with both the EU and the US, etc. And given that our tariffs are more competitive than some of the other competitors in this field. The second and most important aspect, and related to your question, is that the impact on the China plus one strategy. I think this ends uncertainty. This is this tariff overhang was preventing firms to look at India as a manufacturing destination and investment, and also supply chains were being disrupted. And I think this whole certainty going through in this deal would enable this to happen, and the China plus one strategy will become actually a reality. The third thing, very important globally for us, is that given that, as last time also we discussed, we have large number of FTAs over the last, few years, and India will become a trade magnet, right? And this this deal, some people, when you talk of the EU deal is the mother of all deals, this could be termed, and I think Minister Goyal has talked about it as the father of all deals, and so have some industry people. I think this deal is the missing link, which the chief economic advisor has talked about, by aligning US energy, US technology with India, and the investment outlook will go. So very, very clearly, we will see that. And there is a separate trade and technology pact with the US, which we have, which is looking at high technology sectors, and looking at investments in India. And also, what is actually missing in this, we have already taken advanced action in many of the sectors. For example, in this budget, we did nuclear components to zero. We did aircraft components to zero. These were part of the deals, and I think my suspicion is that the US wanted to see some particular action by India in certain sectors before, taking this deal. So yes, it is actually going to spur a lot of activity here. Sectors like medical electronics, sectors like electronic equipments, and the telecom thing, and the whole PLI scheme and telecom was at jeopardy because of the high US tariffs, but now that also going makes that very positive. So it's definitely going to promote technology cooperation, going to promote investment into India, and help India emerge in the areas that we talked about the budget, whether it is electronics, whether it is semiconductors, whether it is chemicals, or whether it is even biosimilars and biologics. So very positive for the country.
That's right. Quite positive, given that the mother and the father of all deals have come in the backdrop of so many deals. I think nearly a dozen FTAs that we've already signed in recent months. We hope, and Ambassador, I'll bring you on this. We hope that this agreement now will bring about that stability in the India-U.S. ties. So perhaps put that friction and the rhetoric behind us and move forward, at least in terms of strengthening our economic partnership. Do you see this agreement bringing about that much needed stability in our strategic partnership?
Yes, indeed. I think it will bring stability in the bilateral relationship. And this will be happening because our Prime Minister has pursued a policy of very balanced diplomacy. All along, he has been pursuing a very forward-looking strategy to protect Indian economic interests without direct confrontation. The US was being very provocative, and some of the statements that were made by the US side were definitely very provocative. But Prime Minister was very composed all through, despite these sort of demands which were being made by the US. And, he highlighted the fact in his response to President Trump and said that when two large economies of the world and the world's largest democracies work together, it benefits our people and unlocks the immense opportunities for mutually beneficial cooperation. This message of the Prime Minister will go across very strongly to the American people. And I think that we are poised to see a very good deal of improving ties between the two sides.
That's right. So as details of the agreement unfold, one thing that's emerged out of this is that after a year of strain and uncertainty in the India-U.S. ties, at least this has given us a reason to find fresh momentum in the ties that we've nurtured for decades, and perhaps this will bring about that much needed stability, as you've rightly said. Time allows us to take up only that much of the program, gentlemen. Thank you once again for joining us and sharing your perspective with us and our viewers. To you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well.
To watch more programs of Sansad TV, subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to like and share them.